Hi, everyone, and welcome to For Immediate Release, the podcast for communicators. This is episode 430, our monthly long-form episode for September 2024. I'm Neville Hobson here in the UK.
And I am Shel Holtz in Concord, California. We have some great content to share with you today. A lot has been happening in the world of marketing, communications, artificial intelligence, of course. And Dan York is here with a report that focuses on money. So you're going to want to stick around for that. But some housekeeping items to take care of. First, starting, Neville, with a rundown of the few episodes that we have produced since the last monthly in August. And that was a result of me traveling and you preparing to move.
Yeah, that's certainly been upside down. You've been enjoying the Pacific waves and the nice, relaxing atmosphere of a cruise liner. We've been boxes all over the place in our house as we prepare for our move to our new house in Somerset, which is 120 miles further southwest from where we are now. I'll probably have a post about that on Facebook at an appropriate time. Getting quite excited now amongst all the boxes. So in any case, for letting you know what episodes we've published since the last monthly in the short form midweeks that we tend to do, we've only done 4, actually, for the very reasons you mentioned, Shel, that you were away for 2 weeks, in fact.
I had the cruise for 1 week, and for 1 week I was on Long Island. This was a meeting of all of the North America companies that our parent company owns, and it was a tech summit, and they invited me to come out and present on artificial intelligence, which I did, and it went very well, so that was exciting.
Excellent. So we did 4 episodes, and 426 came out on August the 30th, and that was quite interesting. We looked at a new approach to measuring generative AI results. HubSpot introduced the AI search grader we talked about, and take a listen to that if that's in your interest area. It's quite worthwhile. 427. In early September, that was a revisit, if you will, to the topic of the metaverse. And we talked a bit about that. What's happened to the metaverse? Not a lot, it seemed. Well, there's quite a bit of stuff going on. We looked at the state of it and discovered it's actually more vibrant and active than you may think. That's worth a listen to. 428, which AI tool is best for what? That is to do with Edelman, who published a report on generative AI tools, focused on those that they describe as being enterprise ready, categorizing them and identifying those that excel at various tasks. We took a look at it. Did it measure up to its promise? We asked. You'll have to listen to the episode to discover what we said about that. But it was actually quite an interesting report that Edelman has done. And that takes us up to 429. That was published just a few days ago. You solo, because I couldn't do anything that week or this past week on that. So you did that one. Fake podcasters discuss real debunk bot. Good headline, that one, Shel. And this is about a tool that designed to talk people out of their beliefs in conspiracy theories. And you discussed that, including a good chunk of the episode using the personas of that tool to have a conversation about the topic, right?
Yeah, actually, it was the personas from a different tool. This was PDF to audio. We'll talk about the reason I did that a little later in the episode. We did have a comment on episode 429, though. This comes from Steve Davis. Says, "You're right, Notebook LM creates voices that are much easier to listen to. This engine," and he's talking about PDF to audio, the one that I use, "creates infuriatingly plastic people speaking at 0.8 human speed. I couldn't listen to the whole piece. That aside, it's a very interesting inflection point in the realm of human communication. Note that I would normally just say communication, but I feel we're entering an era where we need to specify human communication versus AI communication."
Probably a good idea for a couple of days to do that. We'll soon be, well, we won't need to do that, but yeah, it's a bit like, saying you're using a chat bot to do something. It's to help people understand you're not trying to pull the wool over their eyes about something. Yeah, good comment, that actually. And not to mention, or not forgetting to mention, the FIR interviews feed that we rebooted a couple of months ago. We published a new interview a few weeks back with Esri Karlabach talking about speculative fiction in business, notably focusing on science fiction. And that was a really great conversation. 38 minutes. It's got a lot of attention on LinkedIn in particular, that people have liked it a great deal. So that was really good. We have another one coming up, our next one coming up later in October. And this one you've organized, Shal, with Monique Zitnik.
Yeah, Monique has written a book called Internal Communications in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. It's quite good. It's getting a lot of attention. And we'll be chatting with her about that and whatever other topics come up during that conversation. We've also had an episode of Circle of Fellows drop. This is episode number 108 for IABC Fellows, Amanda Hamilton Atwell, Andrea Greenhouse, Ginger Homan, and Mark Schumann were discussing mental wellness for communications leaders. Brad Whitworth moderated that conversation because I was on a cruise ship. Mm-hmm. And coming up is episode 109. This is on October 17th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Brad will be moderating that one, too, because I believe I'll be at the PRSA conference speaking on, wait for it, artificial intelligence. This is on change management, managing and leading within organizations and the impact it has on communication professionals. And the panelists include Zora Artis, Priya Bates, Cindy Schmieg, and Todd Hattori. So these are great conversations, about an hour. They are just conversations on these various important topics, but conversations among fellows who have been designated by the International Association of Business Communicators as leaders in their field. So give them a listen. They're on the FIR Podcast Network.
Fab. So thanks, Shal. So we'll now get into our conversation, and AI is driving a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Our first topic, which we've mentioned the name a couple of times, is about Notebook LM. This is a tool that left me, I tell you, absolutely stunned when I first used it a few days ago, and indeed everyone, you too, Shal, have been stunned at what they've heard people doing with this in terms of the audio quality of what derives. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Let me explain to you what this is and why we're talking about it today. Notebook LM, I think, is a game changer when it comes to how we interact with content. So there's a lot to it. You're familiar with AI tools that summarize text or help you organize notes, ChatGPT and Perplexity, for instance. But this one goes way beyond that. What sets Notebook LM apart is its new feature called Audio Overview. So imagine this. You upload a document, say a blog post you wrote or a technical white paper, perhaps an internal training material, and instead of just getting a written summary, two AI personas, a man and a woman, analyze the document and then have a fully fledged conversation about it. And here's where the jaw drops. I tried it out with a post I published earlier last week about poor security alert emails from Microsoft, and the results sounded nothing like what you might expect from AI-generated content. It was as if two actual people were sitting across from each other, having a natural, unscripted conversation about the topic. The tone, the flow, even the pauses and inflections, they were so human-like, it genuinely gave me goosebumps. Take a listen to this short clip from the audio and see what you think.
With Microsoft. We're going to unpack this article, It's Time to Be Honest About Security Alerts, by Neville Hobson, who gets into why companies use such a vague language, around potential breaches and how that actually impacts all of us. So Hobson, he opens with this scenario where he gets 26, hold on, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
26 identical alerts from Microsoft in one night.
Wow.
All with unique login codes. It's like that they think someone's out there just like, really struggling to type an email address 26 times in a row. Is that really the most likely scenario?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because what you're seeing there is companies trying to soften the blow a little bit.
Okay.
When it comes to potential security breaches, right?
Yeah.
So they use this very...
But there's more. During the full 7-minute recording, the AI personas challenged each other's ideas, raised thoughtful questions, and took the conversation into areas I hadn't even written about. My topic in the post was about security alert emails for online Microsoft accounts. The AI hosts broadened that out into discussing online banking and security. It was a level of natural discourse that you wouldn't believe was generated by an AI or followed a rigid script. There was no script. So this wasn't a scripted dialogue at all. It was dynamic, nuanced, and almost indistinguishable from natural conversation you'd hear on a real podcast, like Shell and me talking, for instance. Now, what I found exciting and perhaps a little unsettling is where this could go next. As Notebook LM evolves, we could see even more sophisticated AI conversations, with these personas becoming more capable of deep dives into topics, potentially even debating complex issues with each other in ways that push the boundaries of AI-human interaction. Imagine the implications for content creation, marketing, or even training in the corporate world. This technology could easily create podcasts, thought leadership discussions, or even serve as AI-driven moderators in forums or business meetings. The unsettling part is to do with privacy and data security, which should be front of mind regarding how user data and uploaded documents and other content are handled and stored, particularly for confidential or sensitive information. This is true of all AI-generated content activity. Balancing innovation with caution will be the key, especially when addressing concerns about privacy, ethics, and accuracy. So, Shell, how do you see communicators making use of this? And what broader challenges do you think might arise as this technology becomes more integrated into our work? As the saying goes, what could possibly go wrong?
Lots could go wrong. But right now, I would caution people from using this in its current form for anything that you're going to publish publicly. And I read Chris Penn's, or part of Chris Penn's, post to LinkedIn about this in episode 429. I'll read it again here. It's not very long. But he points out that it uses Google's text-to-speech Neural Studio voices. They're very good and they're very recognizable if you've ever done any work in the TTS space. And they're the same all the time. All these marketing and AI experts encouraging everyone to use the exact same utility to create content for the exact same content that sounds alike. Lame. Good job, marketers. You've created a massive sea of same. No one's going to remember the content you make because it literally sounds the same as everyone else pushing the easy button. And I think he has a point here. It is the same two voices. And if one brand has those same two voices in a podcast as a competitor or a brand in an industry that has nothing to do with the first one, it's all the same. There's nothing differentiating, and marketing is all about differentiation. So I would caution people about that. I was listening to an interview with Stephen Johnson. This was just yesterday on the most recent episode of the Hard Fork podcast. He's an author. He is on the team at Google behind Notebook LM. And he said their vision for this is not necessarily for publishing these things. It's you've got a 75-page document that you need to absorb. You don't want to read it. It's highly technical. So you upload it to Google LM. You download the resulting podcast, and when you're at the gym, you listen to it and you get the information. It's an individual tool that they had in mind when they produced it. Now, when you look at the potential for this down the road, I mean, as this gets more and more sophisticated and there's more voices to choose from to lend it some originality, even maybe the ability to upload a voice and have that cloned. You can do that in a number of different places right now, but not for this purpose. The other thing is that we're already seeing competitors. As I mentioned, I use PDF to audio.
Hang on a second, Sharon. Let me just comment on a couple of things you said there, because I find it extraordinary that Christopher Penn said what he said, what you read out. This is just come out. It is the two same voices. And yet what I understood from what you read is that he's suggesting that that's how it is, and therefore everything's going to sound the same. That's ridiculous, because this has just come out and people are trying it out. I think as well, the idea that what I'm hearing is that, you can only do it this way because, it's not intended for this or that. People will use it as in ways that Google didn't think of even, I think. And people are going to publish these things because
with
it's
any
as good
tool.
as is.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to take that into account. So to say that it's kind of, don't do it or it's not worth it, makes no sense to me. People are going to experiment with this.
Yeah,
and I think they should, and they should share it, and they will share it. And again, hence my kind of tongue-in-cheek caution about brace yourselves, everyone. There's going to be a wave of this stuff coming our way.
But I think he is seeing, as I am, people who are actually publishing stuff that has been created with this as part of their marketing.
Their mistake in that case, and they will learn or not from that. But I would say, is it a mistake for someone to do that? Again, I think it's very dependent on circumstances and a whole ton of other reasons why they might or might not want to be doing that. But I would encourage anyone to experiment with this. Definitely. Don't, be cautious. Again, we as we've mentioned in other things, but that applies to this definitely. You need to be careful how you use this. You need to, watch what you're uploading that's confidential or to your company or stuff that's not intended for public consumption. Use your common sense, for God's sake, if you're a communicator or a marketer, even. Yeah. But what you said about down the road, of course, that I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly the main point here, is that this is evolving. This is very early stages. And undoubtedly this will come. There was an announcement, I think, literally yesterday or the day before, that you can now upload YouTube videos to this.
Yes, I saw that.
So that's a change. So there's change coming. In the meantime, though, maybe the best advice to give anyone is use this yourself to try it out and see what's possible. And if you feel like you've got something, like I did, for instance, I made a little kind of mini podcast out of it, stuck on YouTube myself, to give an idea of what this is like, hearing the voices. That was my focus. But I'm wondering as well, the one of the other limitations of it at the moment, again, it's a limitation right now, that you ask it to do an audio interview. And you can't give it a huge amount of guidance on where to take that conversation.
Stephen Johnson said that's one of the primary things that they're asking for. Right. People are already reaching out to Google saying, I want this.
That's not there yet. That's the whole point. But the parallel point to that's therefore, don't assume that that's how it is. Of course, that's not the case. So it does let you ask questions. And I haven't yet figured out, because I've tried it, to think, how is that going to work? So I've told it to do an audio interview, and the screen then prompts me with 3 or 4 questions I could ask. Well, that's too late, because they've already done the audio interview. So where's that going? This is not finished or polished yet. Precisely. That's the whole point, right?
Right. So as I mentioned, I did a search and I found there's already a competing product out there. Now, keep in mind that this tool is part of Notebook LM, and Notebook LM is a notebook tool. It's a note-keeping app. And Johnson was saying if he'd had this when he was working on his book, he would have been able to finish in a fraction of the time. It's just that research tool. It's that aid. He says that since he was a kid, he's been writing down quotes from books that he liked, and he's now collecting all of those in Notebook LM, so he has immediate access to those, and that can be voice access. But there is already a competitor. It's called PDF to audio. You have to upload a PDF, but the number of text entry fields where you can control what it does, there are tons of them. It has multiple voices you can choose from. Unfortunately, it doesn't indicate whether they're male or female, and they're not actual names. They're just labels like Echo and Nova and things like that.
So
but
that is
one other thing I want to say about this, though, is that they're not as good. Sorry?
No. I mean, the point I'm making is that is something that no way could you think, oh, that's not very good, because it only does. That's just come out, right? So
right. Within
evolve.
the last week.
So it will evolve, I would imagine.
Oh, definitely. And right now it's only available on Hugging Face, as there are many models available on Hugging Face. But it's not as good as Google LM at the conversation. I used it in episode 429. And it's not as natural a sounding conversation. It is kind of robotic. I mean, it sounds human, but it sounds like earlier voice cloning. But it still gives you an idea of where we're headed with this, with the additional flexibility. And obviously that'll come to Google's Notebook LM product. But I expect to see some bespoke podcaster-focused products to do this. And, I mean, we'll circle back to this idea later in this episode. But the idea of having a podcast host this way, using the virtual influencer that you've adopted for your brand. If that influencer already has 3 million followers, why not just have that influencer's voice host a podcast?
You're right. It could well be, again, I'm just speculating here, that Google might suddenly realize that, wait a minute, we've got something here that has captured imaginations all over the world. And this could then evolve outside of Notebook LM. Like, I could see that possibility. It would make huge sense for them to do that, even, it would seem to me. If we're getting into the area, and this is the tip of a whole new conversation, that we will be having artificial voices. In fact, there's a phrase you used, I think, which I can't quite remember, which I really hate.
Synthetic media?
That's it. I'm going to have to get used to that. That we're going to see this in a good way. There'll be people taking personas, such as the two AI hosts we have in Notebook LM Audio Overview, in a way that makes them more autonomous. And this, I'm thinking in particular of the kind of agent role of an AI agent, such as much of the stuff Jeremiah Aouyang talks about in his Llama Lounge presentations. And we are perhaps getting close to that stage where this will be a use case, if you like, that, and again, I'm just thinking of the example that I did. Here's a document, or here's something that I said, take this, give me an audio overview. I gave very little prompting. There was literally nothing at all. Do it. Here's the document. Go. And what I heard in the clip that I played is from that, is that's what they came out with. I was gobsmacked for that reason, none other. And I was gobsmacked throughout, frankly. But that I could see, it's so natural that it would eclipse what we've seen so far with artificial voices that sound artificial in podcasting. And this could take this to a whole new level for podcasts. And I wonder what the issues are with that on an AI hosted podcast that was generated from a document, and the two hosts created an episode. It goes up on Apple Podcasts and suddenly gets huge popularity. What on earth would that impact have on real podcasts, real quote unquote? So this is in the realms of a very interesting development that potentially could be what we're seeing later this year, even.
Oh, it'll happen fast. And one of the reasons Chris Penn in his post points out, he says the funny thing is Notebooks LM implementation is relatively straightforward to replicate. All you need is a language model to take data and summarize it, optionally diarizing it for multiple speakers, a TTS model to speak aloud the summary, optionally using multiple voices, and a way to save the audio and publish it somewhere. So if that's all it takes, people with the technical chops to do that will be out there creating products. And Stephen Johnson said the other thing that people are asking for is the ability to say, okay, now reproduce that content, but make these changes. Which isn't there. So they're paying attention to what people want. So
of course they are. But
it's just going to improve rapidly.
I would think they've got this planned out pretty deeply already, and getting the feedback is going to help them deliver what people want, I would say. Yeah, exciting time. It definitely seems to me.
Yep. So when you hear the term LinkedIn influencer, I get it. You might be inclined to picture the tech bro archetype who talks about hustle culture and engages in a bit too much self-promotion. But the truth is, companies, and I'm talking big blue chip companies, they're now tapping into influencers within their own employee ranks to reach wider audiences, and they're doing it with a fair amount of success. Take, for example, Deloitte. They've brought in an employee, Laura Sophie Bothur, B-O-T-H-U-R. I'm sure I mispronounced that. She is their first full-time corporate influencer, and she has racked up 400 million impressions, with individual posts reaching about 840,000 people. She's not just talking up Deloitte. She's sharing authentic stories about tech for good, women in technology, advice for young professionals, essentially adding value while sort of subtly weaving in her work with Deloitte. Why is this working so well? Well, there's been a shift in how people engage with content online. A study from Refined Labs found that posts from individual LinkedIn profiles get nearly 3 times as many impressions and 5 times more engagement than posts from corporate accounts. This is why you're seeing more founders like George Savolka of a company called Hebia. This is a generative AI startup, building personal brands to promote their companies. Savolka's posts about his company's fundraising earn significantly more traction than Hebia's official LinkedIn posts. Call it the human touch effect, if you like. People engage with people, not faceless corporations. And Gen Z influencers, whether they're on LinkedIn, TikTok, or Instagram, are really capitalizing on this. Startups like Set Active and Waterboy have also caught on. They're hiring influencers like Sam Viciolo and Jenna Palick to run their social media channels, boosting engagement by as much as 7-fold in some cases. These Gen Z influencers aren't just posting product promos, they're bringing creativity, humor, and most importantly, they're bringing their personalities into the content they produce. It's relatable, it's authentic, and that's exactly what resonates with today's audiences. One of the more innovative campaigns comes from Waterboy. Jenna Palick spearheaded a Cabo with Customers initiative where the company invited customers on an all-expenses-paid trip to Cabo San Lucas in Mexico through a series of social media challenges. The campaign built engagement, it built community, you got to interact with customers in kind of a fun, personal way, and it wound up tying those customers closer to the brand. These influencers, they're doing a great job as spokespeople, but they're not just spokespeople, right? They're demanding real investment from the companies they work for. Palick says keeping influencers engaged and invested in the long term requires the company that they're working for to offer equity or other benefits. Influencers know what they're worth, and they can make more from a few brand partnerships than they would in a traditional corporate employee role. Speaking of traditional corporate roles, a lot of Gen Zers are leaving them behind. Consider Amber Smith, who had a $94,000 a year job. She left it to become a full-time influencer. And she's feeling more fulfilled and controlled as a result of that. Her experience mirrors that of a lot of other Gen Zers who are disillusioned with the 9-to-5 grind. Instead, they're looking for flexibility. They're looking for purpose. And, content creation gives them what they're looking for. And it's not all glamorous, of course. Influencers like Hannah Williams and Carolyn Lasher point out there's constant pressure to create content. There's burnout that comes from always being on. There's a lack of stability. There's no health insurance, no 401k, no safety net. Yet for many of these creators, the trade-off's worth it because they get to build something on their own terms. The research produced one other interesting finding, and that is that half of Gen Z aspire to be entrepreneurs. They want to start their own businesses. For them, being an influencer isn't just about building a personal brand. It's about creating a career with flexibility, creativity, and meaning. So where does this leave brands? Well, if you're looking to reach a Gen Z audience, I hate to say this, you know how I feel about the whole influencer movement in general, but influencers are key, especially if you can give them the creative freedom to make your brand part of their personal narrative. And if you want them to stick around, you'll need to treat them like the valuable partners they are.
That's a very interesting analysis, I think. The changes that are happening, the great examples you've highlighted on this. It does make you wonder, though, from other things that we read, and we've talked about this on other episodes, on the growth of the influencer marketing industry. Where does this fit with this? In that this to me seems a bit different than just purely some kind of marketing approach. This is more natural sounding, even if it is marketing. It's not clear to me though what all this means to the average company doing this. What would you say to the average company reading this and thinking, how can they implement this?
Well, I would say, first of all, is Gen Z a target for your organization? Right. And if it is, what are you doing to reach them? Yeah. And that's where you start to bring in this idea of, well, do you have Gen Z employees who you can enlist to become influencers? And are you willing to give them free rein to talk about things other than the great products or services that we offer? And the other is, will you work with an external influence? Will you bring in a Gen Z influencer to manage your social media? These are all new considerations that don't fit in the traditional marketing box. So, yeah, I mean, you look at companies like Wendy's, which they've done a great job developing a unique voice that's a kind of snarky and funny, and people have loved that account for a long time. But I'm not sure that we're talking about the same thing, because they are talking about their products, right? They are talking about their burgers and fries. And this is different, right? This is building engagement with the brand through the personalities and discussion of sort of brand adjacent issues. Like in the case of that one influencer I mentioned, talking about tech for good and women in technology and things like that. I think she was the one with Deloitte. So it's really a shift in mindset for the people who are responsible for marketing in how we're going to approach this. Doesn't mean you're not going to do TV commercials or magazine ads or placements in the media or what have you. This is, as Mitch Joel would say, along with and not instead of, but it's becoming increasingly important because this is what resonates with the Gen Z audience.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting my mind when you started talking about this topic, the story of Lara Sophie Botha as the corporate influencer at Deloitte, and thinking, here's somebody who posts on LinkedIn. It doesn't say how many posts have been. 400 million impressions. I mean, that is gobsmacking, I would say.
Among nearly 1 million different people, unique people.
Right. And individual posts reaching 840,000 people on average. I wonder, we don't have any information in the article that you used here, but what impact did that have for Deloitte? I mean, do you want to hazard a guess? I mean, what would they have got out of that, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, you would get a lot of people who might now be interested in going to work for Deloitte. And let's face it, Gen Z is where new hires are coming from right now. So that's who you want to appeal to in that employer branding world. Whether it is attracting potential clients, I don't know. They may be focused on the employment angle with these posts, specifically at Deloitte. I'm not going to say that about the others that I referenced, but I don't know. I'd have to ask their marketing people if they're measuring any new business acquisition.
We can get some clues, I think, because one of the bits that jumped out at me in the Times piece that you used to reference this was some research that this company they talked to said sharing information through a personal LinkedIn profile, so Lara's own profile, led to nearly 3 times as many impressions and 5 times as much engagement as doing so through a company's LinkedIn profile. So the article says this checks out when you compare Deloitte's and Botha's posts. Deloitte has 16 million followers on LinkedIn and had about 30 likes per post for its last 10 posts, whereas Botha has 300,000 followers only, not 16 million, yet had about 2,700 likes per post. People are engaging with the individual, to your point you made earlier. And it seems potentially, I mean, I'm speculating here, but could it be that because she's not visibly and prominently associated with Deloitte directly, she comes across perhaps as more someone like me, it's more authentic. Whereas that even if Deloitte in their LinkedIn profile is a very approachable company, it's still a corporate entity. And whoever's doing it is still the corporation, the capital C. So
there's an underlying motive to everything they post, right? And you don't necessarily feel that from an individual.
No.
But, the other thing to consider is employee advocacy programs. I manage one of those. So I'll put out a post and I'll say, hey, everybody share this. And, most of them will.
Most of them do.
But this does not create a following for them. They're only sharing when I say to share or offer a post to share, as opposed to somebody who has been enlisted as an influencer and is making an effort to get a certain number of posts out there every week and generating that kind of quality engagement, right? I'd rather have a couple of 100,000 followers who like a post 6,000 times than have 6 million followers who like a post 30 times. I'll take the quality engagement over the pure numbers of followers.
Yeah, and that's a good point to nail home, I think. I've had this conversation with people a lot of times over the years, which is impressions are not the key metric, for God's sake. It's not how many eyeballs saw your piece. It's what did those eyeballs do when they saw your piece. So your point is very valid. X million views and 30 engagements is nothing when you've got the example earlier of 300,000 followers, yet 2,700 likes in terms of engagement. So it's a no-brainer, it seems to me. That's what you need to focus on. These are really good examples that come out in this article, I must admit. So this is a good one to talk about.
Yeah, it's so good that I've made some notes to take back to work because I think we do a good job with our social media account given the limited resources we have. But I think we need to find some individuals in the company to start posting regularly. And we have a couple who already are that I can just twist their arm and say, can you do some more on some other stuff? So yeah, I'm taking this back to work. This is a good one.
It is. So continuing the theme of influencers, this takes us to our next topic, which is addressing the question. Can we answer the question? We'll address it, certainly. Will this be the first influencer election? We're talking about...
You've got to be talking about our election, right? Yours is over.
We're talking about the US presidential election on November the 5th, which is a day well known in the UK because that was the day Guy Fawkes tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament back in the 17th century. So memorable day. But this is interesting because we talked about this in our monthly a month ago about Kamala Harris's campaign to embrace Gen Z by Gen Zers who make up the social team in her campaign structure. Here's an article in Provoke Media. Founder Paul Holmes pens this piece. Which I guess to introduce it a bit, we're seeing the first time in the US presidential election, both the Republican and Democratic conventions have given influencers a formal seat at the table, acknowledging their unique power to shape opinions and drive engagement, especially among younger, more diverse voters. That's Gen Z, folks. That's what we've been talking about. So Holmes says that traditional media is slowly losing its grip on the very demographics that could sway this election. People are no longer tuning into CNN or Fox News for the political updates, especially Gen Z. Instead, they're scrolling through TikTok, watching YouTube, or listening to podcasts, places where influencers have built strong, authentic relationships with their audiences. And that's what makes influencers such valuable assets to political campaigns today, Holmes says. They've become trusted messengers, using their platforms to speak directly to voters in a way that feels far more personal and engaging than a typical campaign ad. On the Democratic side, Kamala Harris's team has embraced this strategy wholeheartedly, tapping into younger creative teams to produce viral content that resonates with internet culture. We discuss this at length in FIR 425 in August, as I mentioned. It's a move that supercharged their campaign's digital presence and is shaping up to one of the most inventive voter outreach strategies we've seen in recent times. Meanwhile, Republicans have been ahead of the curve, particularly during the Trump era. Influencers aligned with right-wing politics have played a major role in driving unified, orchestrated messaging. Names like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro are just as recognizable as many political pundits with millions of followers who tune in regularly. But as with any new tactic, there are challenges. Campaigns have to balance maintaining control over their messages while giving influencers the freedom to be authentic. After all, that's the secret sauce to their connection with audiences, trust and authenticity. If campaigns overmanage influencers, they risk losing the very qualities that make them effective. So the big question is, will this shift to influencer-led campaigning make a real difference when Americans go to the polls in November? It's too soon to tell, says Holmes, but one thing's for sure. The dynamics of political campaigning are changing, and influencers are at the center of this evolution. Their ability to engage voters who might otherwise remain indifferent could be a game changer in what's shaping up to be a closely fought election. But we must also consider a current wild card that will likely disrupt this traditional scenario: AI personas as influencers. Consider the example of Notebook LM's conversation creator we talked about earlier in this podcast, and what DebunkBot can do with persuading people out of their beliefs in conspiracy theories that Shell talked about in FIR 429. Meta has big ambitions for using AI for influencing in this way. The Verge reported on Meta's plans that involve fully recreating real influencers as AI figures. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg presented a live demo of a creator-based AI persona at its Connect event last week, which looked like the creator, talked like the creator, and tried to respond to questions like the creator would. It was pretty wild to watch, says The Verge. There's lots going on with how influencers are reshaping modern political campaigns in the US and elsewhere, and what influencers could mean for the future of elections.
One of the things that's so fascinating about this is that it's not either or. There is a symbiotic relationship between the influencers and the mainstream media because, and I've noticed this particularly on the Trump campaign, is that you will hear on the news that Trump said X on a podcast. So he is regularly appearing as a guest on conservative podcasts. Now, is this a good strategy? I mean, the news is getting out about what he said, but is he reaching new voters, or is he only reaching people who are already going to vote for him? So, strategically, I'm not sure this is the best approach, but the fact is that when he's on a podcast and he says something, you're going to hear about it in the New York Times and the Washington Post and NPR and NBC. So I think it's smart to leverage this stuff. And for the Harris campaign to be so prominent on TikTok in particular, where the younger voters are who typically don't show up at the polls, makes a lot of sense. But I think ultimately what this speaks to is the rise of social media as a primary source of information and a primary driver of not just political campaigns, but marketing campaigns and social movements and you name it. It has arrived. It's now right up there with mainstream media, traditional media, in terms of its influence. And of course, that means you're nuts if you're not tapping into it as a communicator.
Greetings, Shell and Neville and FIR listeners all around the world. It's Dan York coming at you on a beautiful, gorgeous autumn day here in Shelburne, Vermont. And I want to talk about money this month. First, though, I will say I, too, have been amazed by the whole Notebook LM thing. So I'm curious I'll be great to listen to the show. I listened to episode 429, and I'm going to continue to play with it in my own space. But coming back, let's talk about money and three different aspects of it. First up, I was intrigued this month that Substack rolled out the ability for people to stream live videos as another way to connect with audiences. Now, Substack, of course, began as a newsletter platform, several years back, whatever that was when it started. But then they've kind of kept on evolving. They started to do like little notes that you could add on, sort of like Twitter or something. They allowed you to publish video podcast kind of things or audio and stuff on that line. So they've been continuing to do something like that. I will admit I've had some personal concerns about the direction where Substack's going, such that I left Substack to set up my own newsletter somewhere else. But still, it's interesting because there's so many people using it. And now they've rolled out the ability that you can go and just do live video streaming. They're also looking to go and make that a premium feature so that you could be able to offer that as part of your premium subscriptions or something like that. You could see how that could evolve. Now, will all writers want to also be streamers? Probably not. I think there's a very strong difference between that. But there will be some who will. Some who want to go and make it part of what they're doing. I could very easily see it as a way to go and respond to current events, respond to breaking news, do something like that to go live and talk about that. If you've used Substack as a platform and you've built a newsletter base, you've done something like that, you could very much see that if you're the kind of person who can, do the whole live streaming thing. So that's one way people can potentially make money or add on things. I want to talk about a second thing, which is money in open source. And this came to a big head this month with the WordCamp US, where Matt Mullenweg, the project leader of WordPress, had a bit of a very big public dispute with one of the other companies in the WordPress space, WP Engine. Now, to back this up, to go in this, WordPress is open source software. It is community driven. It is open source. Anybody can use it, can build on it. It uses a specific license that allows you to not necessarily just take it and go and create your own version and sell it and everything else. You have to give back. It's part of the licenses that are in there. But you expect people to contribute. One of the companies that's been involved for a while is a company called WP Engine. Wait, let me back up. Automatic, Mattic, Automatic, is the company that sort of shepherds WordPress. They don't own WordPress, the system, but they do own WordPress.com, which is one of the hosting platforms. Automatic also owns Tumblr, Day One. They have a number of different applications and services and things there, but they are looking out to try to build, the open source ecosystem around WordPress and everything else. So they're a player in this space. They do a lot. They contribute a lot. They contribute a lot to the code. They contribute a lot of money for the WordPress community. And there's another company in the space called WP Engine, which is also a hosting provider for WordPress. They provide that kind of capabilities. They have subsidized or supported a number of different projects like advanced custom fields and something called local WP and some other different pieces. They've been a player in the industry for a while. But Matt Mullenweg got it in his head to focus on the fact that they have not been contributing as much, in his opinion, as other companies, and certainly as a company that does so much. Now, part of this also comes into the fact that WP Engine was acquired by a private equity company, Silver Lake. And many private equity companies really exist to extract as much value out of everything as they can so that they can pass on that return to their investors and shareholders. In a somewhat cynical view of the world, that's sort of the take on a lot of private equity. And Matt Mullenweg was rather upset, I think it seems like, with Silver Lake's ownership, the introduction of private equity in such a large player and not contributing. So there was a very public shaming of WP Engine through the WordCamp US. There's all sorts of accusations. There are now lawsuits flying back and forth and cease and desist. It's actually terrible for the WordPress community. It's a terrible situation right now because there are good people working at Automatic, good people at WP Engine. They've all been working together in different ways. At a high level, this comes down to how is an open source ecosystem funded? How is it people contributing? How are people doing stuff? It's kind of a messy situation. I will admit, based on what I've heard, I don't think Matt handled it perhaps as delicately as it could have been. There's some various different pieces that went on, but it's a challenge. How do you fund an open source ecosystem? This is the ongoing challenge, and this kerfuffle that exploded within the WordPress community has spilled out into, obviously, courts and the social media and everything else. We'll have to see where it goes, but it's a harsh time right now, and it's a tragedy for the community. Hopefully it'll move on, but it ultimately does come back to how do you fund and contribute to an open source community, which brings me to the last of the three topics I want to talk about, which on the positive side was the launch of the Social Web Foundation. This is a project, it's a new foundation that has been launched to shepherd the world of ActivityPub, Mastodon, but also Flipboard, but also Threads, but also all of these different companies that are part of the Fediverse, the folks that are connecting through the ActivityPub protocol. And it's really an amazing launch just of the people who are involved. Automatic, the company I just mentioned, is also part of that. Meta, Ghost, PixelFed, Medium, Fastly, Vivaldi, the browser. Number of different players are all part of this in some way, shape, or form. It's led by a gentleman named Evan Prodromo, who he's the editor of the ActivityPub specification, and he just wrote a book for O'Reilly around this. Also, Mallory Knodel, who is the CTO of the Center of Democracy and Technology, and I've known her through standards and other pieces. and a gentleman named Tom Coates. But the intent of the Social Web Foundation is it's focused on how do you build and fund an ecosystem around ActivityPub. What can they do? Now, ActivityPub was standardized as a protocol by the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C. But what the Social Web Foundation is looking to do is to be the advocacy and education platform for the Fediverse, basically helping it grow, helping it expand. They mentioned that there's over 100 different software implementations of ActivityPub. They want to help grow that ecosystem and fund that ecosystem and figure out how to go and help make it so we have more choice. We have an option beyond the platforms that are out there. So I would encourage you, go check it out, socialwebfoundation.org. As it says there, an open future for social networks. Do check that out. It's an important contribution and something I think that will be very important to see where this goes. Sorry I ran long, guys, but this was a lot to talk about, all coming back to money in some way. How do you fund these things? Thanks for listening. You can find more of my audio and writing at danyork.me. Bye for now.
That was a terrific report, Dan. Thank you. And yeah, money. It's what struck me, well, quite a bit what you said struck me, actually, but the WordPress kerfuffle. The WordPress WP Engine kerfuffle really is not a good thing. I agree with you. It's not good that this is happening. Yet I can well understand Matt Mullenweg's position on this. He has accused WP Engine. He actually called them a cancer. That was seriously a deep thing to say. But you mentioned the private equity firm that bought, maybe that's part of the driver, but what Mullenweg is accusing them of is actually all take and no give at all. And they're making use of the goodwill of the community to enrich themselves, is a sense of what I'm getting from what he's saying. And using resources and intellectual property of WordPress without giving back into the community. So he cut them off. It was quite severe what he did. But the latest I saw was a report yesterday where he's kind of giving WP Engine a reprieve to sort out the ability for their customers to update their plugins and all that kind of stuff. And they got a deadline to do this by the 1st of October. That's really upping the stakes. So he's not backing down on this. And I hear what you say, Dan, about this is probably not good the way he's handling all of this. I get his passion in this. He was more than just one of the kind of influencing voices in Automatic. He was the co-founder of WordPress back in the very, very beginning. And so this is a very thing close to him. And I think I'd side more with Matt, maybe not so much with the way he's gone about this confrontational approach. It makes me think of maybe Israel and what's going on in Lebanon as perhaps not a good example of people doing stuff like that. But he's pretty firm on the fact they need to sort out a licensing deal with WordPress to continue. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think the cease and desists and all that stuff are precursors to the real battle that's coming. I'm not quite sure whether that's a lawsuit or what, don't know. But WP Engine is a big player in this whole ecosystem of WordPress. And so it hopefully they'll sort this out without too much catastrophe embracing the landscape and affecting all the users.
Yeah, I imagine 90% of WordPress users will never even hear about this.
Oh, I think it's been in the mainstream media, but it's not a kind of front page headlines. But I think it is. If you use WordPress, you will probably hear about this. I'm not talking about the kind of hobbyist blogger, of which there are millions, but you're using it in a way like you or I might use it for our professional interests as well. You'll hear about this, and it's not good that this is happening like this, I have to say.
No, not at all. I was also struck by the item Dan reported on Substack introducing streaming video, which doesn't really surprise me if they define their business as enabling people to reach their audiences. A newsletter is just the first shot out of the gate, right? I mean, Jeff Bezos, when he started Amazon, he started with just books, but his vision was always the place to shop for everything. So you got to start somewhere. You don't want to start with everything all at once. Then you're managing too much at the outset. Too much goes wrong, and you can't get it all fixed. But this makes perfect sense to me. It's interesting though, because my understanding is that Substack is still facing some blowback. Casey Newton made a big deal about leaving Substack because they're publishing Holocaust denial newsletters and things like that. Apparently their filters or their policies are not stopping some really heinous stuff, and people don't want to be associated with that. We'll see if they fix that, or if this ability to live stream to the same audiences you distribute your newsletter to will attract enough people who just don't care about that, or maybe aren't even aware of it. But interesting times. Great report, Dan.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Let's go back to the presidential election for a minute. Is it going to be the first influencer election, you asked? And as you noted, one of the things influencers are doing, an army of them, is publishing content in social networks. And a lot of what they're publishing are memes. You can go to these meme sites and find headlines like the 20 best Kamala Harris memes. News is filled with coverage of the viral meme wave that Harris is riding. So let's talk about meme marketing. I don't want to sound like John Oliver, but let's talk about meme marketing. Yeah, those humorous images and videos you scroll past or share every day are becoming powerful tools for brands to connect with audiences and even drive revenue. Meme marketing has become a high leverage marketing strategy that some of the world's biggest brands and startups are using to reach millions and in some cases to make millions. It leverages humor and relatability to capture attention quickly in a digital landscape that has just been overcrowded with content. It's the modern iteration of humor-based marketing, and that's been around since newspaper ads in the 1700s. But today's memes are internet native, they're fast, they're free to create. Makes them a very efficient way to go viral. So how does it work? Well, let's break it down. The first step is to have a deep understanding of your industry. To create memes that resonate, you have to be deeply immersed in your marketplace. You have to understand the nuances, the in-jokes, the pain points that only insiders know. If you're in the startup world, for instance, you might create memes about venture capitalists taking summers off to party in France. The key, again, is authenticity. You can't fake this insider knowledge. The second step is to highlight industry problems. The best memes poke fun at common challenges within an industry. This not only elicits a chuckle, but it also creates a sense of community among those who get it. If you're marketing to accountants, maybe a meme about the quirks of Excel formulas would hit the mark. You make your content highly relatable when you zero in on shared experiences. The third step is to be mindful of who you might offend. A little edginess can make a meme more engaging, but you need to know where to draw the line. It's okay to tease certain groups, but you have to be strategic about it. For instance, if your product serves engineers, you might develop some memes that poke fun at project managers. The goal is to entertain without alienating your core audience. Fourth step is to embrace the cringe. Don't be afraid of a little cringe. In the world of meme marketing, being overly polished can work against you. Memes thrive on authenticity and spontaneity. By embracing a less formal approach, you can appear more genuine and relatable. In the attention economy, being funny and even a bit awkward can translate into engagement and then revenue. And finally, prioritize speed over perfection. In meme culture, timing is everything. Trends come and go like the wind, so it's essential to act quickly. Don't get bogged down worrying about perfect design, high production values. Use simple tools like Canva or Adobe Express or even basic meme generators to get your content out while it's still a hot topic. So let's look at a few real-world examples. Duolingo, the language learning app, has embraced meme culture wholeheartedly. They're using funny content to engage users and make language learning fun. Netflix has been using memes to promote shows and movies. Gucci, luxury brand, getting in on the action. They've used popular meme formats to make their brand more accessible and to engage younger audiences. Unstop has had this campaign for Flipkart Grid 6.0, reaching engineering students across India by speaking their language with memes and Gen Z lingo. They don't have a big media budget. They're focused on digital platforms using memes to build engagement and registrations. And they broke some records on their participation. And then there's a Youngin Advertising Agency, specializes in meme marketing, creating campaigns that become conversation points on the net. They hire creatives that are immersed in social media culture, and as a result have been able to craft campaigns that resonate with those young audiences. It's not without its risks. If not executed carefully, meme marketing can backfire. If you misuse or misinterpret a meme, it can make you look out of touch. McDonald's had a recent attempt at this that had no context, and it left a lot of consumers confused and unimpressed. And they said so in the social media shares that they did. I found this meme, and I got to admit, it was just confoundingly bad. You could offend your audience because humor is subjective, and what one person finds funny, another could take offense to. So be cautious and considerate in your approach, and don't overdo it. Relying too heavily on memes can really dilute your brand message. They should complement your marketing strategy and not dominate it. But as Gen Z and Gen Alpha become the new wave of consumers and future business leaders, the importance of meme marketing is just going to grow. These generations have grown up with the internet. They're highly fluent in its language and trends. Memes aren't just jokes to them. They're a form of communication. One study highlighted that 55% of 13 to 15-year-olds send memes every week and 30% send them daily. So with millennials and Gen Z now occupying 40% of the consumer population, ignoring meme marketing means missing out on a big opportunity.
Things have really changed, haven't they? I mean, looking through some of the case studies listed in the magazine, in the article in Social Samosa you talked about, some of the numbers are quite mind-blowing that have resulted. So in one of these, for instance, from the a company called eMotorrad, Instagram, 18 million organic views, YouTube, 7 million, 1,500% increase in followers, total impressions over 180 million, sales impact, campaign sales doubled, 650% surge in brand search activity. I mean, these are measurable events that arguably, surely this must be, you'd be saying to yourself, why am I going to spend any money in this newspaper, this traditional print magazine that's also online? Why am I going to do that when I can get results like this? And this is exactly the audience we want. That's the key thing. Never forget this. And you pointed this out. You need to know your audience. You need to know exactly who you're targeting. This is focused on Gen Z. And so if that's not your target, don't read this stuff then, because doing this with boomers ain't going to work. That's a fact. Wrong channels. Mind you, Shell, you and I are not, with the exception to these stereotypes, are we not?
But we proved the rule. So
we'd be impressed by this. We would. So, but this is terrific stuff to learn from and see what people are doing. So I think this is really, really good. I'm truly wondering, do you think this kind of signals, or has it already happened, a genuine shift in the media landscape, where you're seeing these kinds of numbers as the kind of outcomes of your activity, in which case other stuff I've seen, as you I'm sure have as well, talking about the growth of influencer marketing and the numbers in revenue terms that are accruing from all of that. Are we seeing a shift, or is this just part of the overall landscape?
Oh, I think we're absolutely seeing a shift where traditional mainstream media, particularly TV news, radio news, for example, they're not the sources for a huge swath of the population. As I just said, 40% of the consumer population is Gen Z and millennial. And I hope everybody connected the dots between this meme marketing report and the earlier report on hiring Gen Z influencers, either bringing them in from within the organization or hiring them to run your social media marketing or what have you. This is all part of a bigger whole. I really think that we need to focus on this as a dimension of marketing and communication that taps into this, that recognizes this shift in the media. I think it's a pretty profound shift, and it's happening in front of our eyes right now.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so here's a topic that's been gaining a lot of attention in the podcasting world, the enduring dominance of chat podcasts like this one that you're listening to, and what the future holds for this medium. Wired has an article with a provocative title, Chat Podcasts Rule the Market and Always Will. It's an interview with Eric Eddings, an audio executive in the US, where he highlighted some fascinating insights on why chat podcasts continue to reign supreme even as the industry evolves. Despite the rise of video and platforms like YouTube and TikTok changing how we engage with content, chat podcasts remain the cornerstone of the industry. Why, you may wonder? Well, according to Eddings, their strength lies in their simplicity and their ability to build a deep, authentic connection with listeners. Whether it's comedians, influencers, or everyday individuals exploring new ideas, the chat format offers a flexible, low-cost way to create content regularly. And that's something narrative podcasts with their higher production costs and complex storytelling can't really match. What's interesting is that Eddings emphasized that innovation in podcasting doesn't have to come from AI, which is the hot topic today. While AI tools like transcription software have improved workflows, the essence of podcasting, real human connection and conversation, remains the driving force. So even though tech is a big part of the industry evolution, the heart of the medium hasn't really changed. Eddings touches on how celebrities have entered the podcasting space, not always to great success. For those shows that do work, it's less about celebrity status and more about creativity and a genuine connection with the audience. He made it clear that the industry still has room for new voices, but is facing challenges, especially with the rise of video podcasts. There's a concern that video might become a barrier to entry for creators who don't have the resources to invest in it. And let's consider AI, especially in light of what we've discussed so far regarding AI personas doing chat podcasts. Consider, too, recent research in the US by Vox Topica on one particular demographic, registered voters, on how much they listen to podcasts, what they listen to, and how influential podcasts are to their opinions and actions. 85% said they trusted podcasts far more than mainstream or social media as their news and information source. 63% said podcasts changed their opinions on issues. So what do these insights mean for the future of podcasting? How does the chat format continue to dominate? What role does innovation, whether through AI or video, play? And what lessons can communicators take away who are interested in leveraging these trends? What do you think, Shel?
I think it's a really important topic for everybody to consider as they think about the role of podcasting in their communication or marketing mix. I am saddened a bit, even though I agree that chat podcasts will always rule. And the reason for that isn't that we're craving the human connection we get from two people talking on a podcast. It's because they're cheap and they're easy. We saw the phenomenal uptake of the original Serial podcast, and we saw a number of podcasts follow from NPR and from other media outlets and even some independents that took that approach where they traveled the world and they did interviews and they had high level production values, but the revenue that they generated from those podcasts weren't sufficient to support the cost of production. And that's why we've seen a lot of them go away. Invisibilia, I loved Invisibilia. It's gone. They couldn't afford to keep doing it. This type of podcast with you and me talking, anybody can do that. So yeah, you're going to see that continue. If you want to stand out, though, and you're using this not to generate revenue from podcast advertising, but as a marketing channel to build your customers' affinity for your brand or for your organization, you might want to step away from the chat podcast because there is a sameness to that. Every time I go to listen to one of the podcasts, my go-to podcasts, whether it's political or technological or business focused or so, there's a sameness to two people having this conversation and reporting on recent developments or recent news. And I still think that if you go for that feature story, tell a great story with multiple voices and some high production values, you're going to get a lot of attention for that because it does differentiate you from what everybody else is doing. So I think that's an important consideration.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, the format you described, you're right. There's a sameness. I sense the same on my go-to podcasts. But is that not perhaps, I often wonder that this is kind of taking the original format of radio, right, which was an interview, two people having a conversation on a radio show, and amplified it hugely as more people started doing this. That's just simply taking that model and amplifying it completely with so many more podcasts, with all the consequences of poor production values. I'm now thinking that, we talked about authenticity, originality, and the humanness of conversation. I think that has been thrown upside down with this example of Notebook LM in particular, not the only one, but it's been a thought in front of my mind all week since I listened to the output it did on my little experiment.
Yeah.
That it's so authentic sounding that I could well see this becoming podcasters competing, and indeed maybe adding more to two people talking through the dynamic interactions between the two demonstrated in that experiment. So I could think of half a dozen podcasts I don't listen to anymore, but and the reason mostly being is that they were boring as hell, frankly. Not the topic so much, but the folks doing it.
The presentation.
It was dreadful. So the dross out there needs to go away. And of course, this is humans we're talking about, so it won't. So you need to rise up and bob to the surface. And I believe very strongly that is a lot to do with the authenticity and genuineness of your conversation. We've seen now that AIs can do that too. So should we be worried, do you think, Shell? Are we going to be replaced?
No, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that a lot of podcasters do, and I'm talking about podcasters who grow a large following. They have a large audience, and yet they find that the advertising revenues are not sufficient to cover the costs of this production and allow them to pay the bills and the rent every month, are starting to go on tour and do live presentations of the podcast before a live audience that buys tickets. You see this with Pod Save America. You see this with My Favorite Murder and Criminal and any number of them. We're going on the road. We're going to be in these towns on these dates. Buy tickets. And people do. They show up. And your AI voices can't do that. They can't get up on a stage and be the real person. I get to see them live and in person. And I think there's a real thrill factor to that for people who are fans of a show. So it's just something that the AI can't do. So I see the AI voices supplementing. I see it being fine for marketing. Will it replace what Phoebe Judge does on Criminal? No, I don't think so.
Good. Our jobs are safe for a while then. That's good to hear. I think it is interesting, though. The reality is that we're talking, when we talk about AI hosts, this is audio. This cannot work visually because, what are you going to watch? The illustration I accompanied my blog post about this whole thing was created by Adobe Firefly. And I deliberately, when I use these, I deliberately don't try and make them look as realistic as possible. You look at it and it's a metaphor and you get the sense. If you look at it closely, you can see some kind of, like too many fingers or one missing, that kind of thing. So this doesn't work except audibly, I would say. But I think it will be a feature of the landscape. But I equally think, again, I'm sort of semi-joking when I'm talking about should we be worried about our jobs. Of course we shouldn't. But it is something to think about seriously, that the way the market is going, and this article in Wired, or this interview in Wired, talking about chat podcasts ruining the market and always will. I have a problem with that phrase, and always will. It's a bit like never say never. You can't say always. You don't honestly know. But for the foreseeable future, maybe. But I
That was
believe
exactly the phrase I had in mind.
Right. I believe chat podcast, that word and how we understand what it means, will evolve. The meaning will evolve, and related mostly to who is doing the chats. And maybe it might even be what they're chatting about. And what do I mean by that exactly? Because, there are topics galore out there. That's precisely the point. The more nuanced you are, the more specialized you are in the sense of meeting certain individuals' needs rather than being like the shotgun scatter effect. And this
Trying to be
isn't
everything
brand
to all
new.
people.
Yeah, this is no brand new revelation here. This is a simple common sense in marketing, I suppose, that you got to understand your target audience. You got to know what they want, and you've got to be able to have the wherewithal and the talent to deliver that. And you said earlier that what you and I do, anyone could do. True. Which is how we started. If you've got an idea, you want to have a chat about it, you've got the equipment. In those days, it was pretty bare bones. Now it's quite sophisticated. It needs more than that, though, to rise above the dross out there. And that's probably a very arrogant way of saying it. But to differentiate yourself is worth giving your attention to. I like to think that we're in that space with our listeners with this podcast over the years. And you mentioned going on the road. We did a bit of that, actually, did we not, Shell, back in the first decade when we were doing this. Whenever I went over to the US, we did tours almost at conferences we were talking at, and they were fun.
Dinners, we did FIR dinners.
We did. They were great.
We met Brian Person for the first time at an FIR dinner.
We did. That was super. So there's lots to do here. And I think that this really is quite intriguing. This, to me, is a catalyst for further conversation and indeed further observations how the market develops. But we're at a time, unquestionably, of crossroads, of an intersection that's evolving. I'm not sure whether it's any kind of tipping point. Maybe it is. But we're seeing something interesting evolving in front of our very eyes that I think will have a big impact on podcasting.
Probably so. So let's review some of the things that we have talked about today. We have talked about memes. We have talked about Notebook LM with the voices of two people who don't exist having a very natural conversation about the content that you have provided them. We have talked about influencers who are representing organizations by talking about tangential information. The idea of deepfakes has sort of wormed its way into the conversation, all kinds of challenges to authenticity. And what all of this means is that the demand for transparency is emerging as one of the most vital foundations for content. Transparency isn't just about compliance. We can talk about the kind of transparency that regulations in Europe and California require, but this is really ensuring that marketers can place their content effectively and generate high-quality leads. And the days of opaque syndication practices, I think, are behind us, and partly because of that shifting media landscape, but partly because of the skepticism with which people approach the content they see, knowing that there's a good chance that it could be fake, could have been an image generated by Midjourney or Firefly or what have you. Brands and agencies are calling for a new standard of absolute transparency, one that reflects the values and preferences of audiences while still safeguarding those audiences' data. Which brings us to the importance of authenticity in branding. 81% of consumers say trust is a major deciding factor in their purchasing decisions. Problem is, consumer trust is at an all-time low, and that's largely because of the rampant spread of misinformation and the overwhelming amount of content that we're bombarded with every day. People are craving something real. They're tired of glossy exteriors and self-promotional content that just doesn't resonate with them. The rise of user-generated content is a testament to this shift, and that's been going on for, 20 years now. Brands that embrace authenticity and transparency are the ones connecting with audiences on a deeper level. Take Patagonia and REI, for example. These are brands that have excelled at creating engaging, people-centered content that reflects their core values. They've pivoted from being brand-centric to being people-centric, using social media not just as a marketing tool, but as a platform for engagement, listening, and learning from their customers. Now, the journey toward authenticity isn't without its problems. Some brands have stumbled by not knowing their audience or trying to be everything to everyone, as we just talked about. Look at the Bud Light partnership with Dylan Mulvaney as a case in point. This was an attempt to attract a younger demographic, but it ended up alienating their core customers, and they still haven't recovered from that. Although, to be fair, it's really terrible beer. That might have something to do with it. Others have stumbled by attempting to be edgy or humorous, but ending up offending their audience. We talked about Bumble's ad on the show. It proclaimed, "You know full well a vow of celibacy is not the answer." That came off as tone deaf and offensive, and it prompted the company to pull the ads and issue an apology. They had billboards they did with that they had to take down. So how do brands actually create an authentic presence? Well, it really starts with deep discovery. We talked about this earlier when we talked about the meme marketing. You have to know what's inherently real about your company and reflect that in your branding. It's sort of branding from the inside out, making sure that your brand represents your company's persona and the customer's experience. This really reduces the chance of a disconnect during the customer journey. Embracing authenticity isn't just good optics. It contributes to the bottom line. It's significantly more expensive, anywhere from 25 times and anywhere up to 25 times more to attract a new customer than it is to keep an existing customer happy. You may remember Joe Jaffe's book, Flip the Funnel. That was the whole focus of that book, that you should focus on building lasting relationships that translate into loyalty and advocacy. Embracing authenticity is a good place to start. And before we move on, let's touch on the role of technology, particularly AI, in this landscape. Because despite the billions invested in AI tech companies, recent research suggests that labeling products as AI-powered can actually deter customers. A study that was published in the Journal of Hospitality Marketing and Management found that describing a product as using AI lowers a customer's intention to buy it. And why is that? It's because consumers, they're afraid of the unknown, and they have concerns about data security. We were talking about adopting AI at work, and one of our employees said, "I won't touch it until I'm confident that my data will be secure." They don't know what's happening behind the scenes, customers. They don't know the algorithms, the data processing, and that lack of transparency breeds mistrust. Brands need to be cautious about how they introduce AI into their products and services. And just slapping an AI-powered label isn't enough and could be counterproductive. Instead, focus on communicating the tangible benefits of AI to consumers. Explain how it enhances the experience, solves their problems, or adds value to their lives. I mean, this is marketing 101 stuff, right? What's in it for me? Transparency here means demystifying the technology and making it accessible and understandable. And that would ease the fears that consumers bring to the table. So transparency and authenticity are vital. They're not one size fits all. And by the way, those influencers we talked about earlier in the episode, they need to reflect this transparency and authenticity in order to avoid a messaging disconnect.
Plenty to take away from all of that, Shell, I must admit. I guess if I were to kind of synthesize a lot of that into a feeling, what I would say about this, what's the most important thing? It comes down to the core values of your organization and the leadership role in living those values. And to me, that's the core of everything that you do. More important even than your strategic plan or understanding who your audience is. It is knowing who you're trying to reach and why they, or understanding why they value and align with your brand. It strikes me that we see too many examples of organizations not doing that, and even saying that their brand values are paramount to everything, and then changing gear and ditching all that because someone complained about it. And they said, okay, we'll ditch those values and agree and do what you would like them to be. You destroy your trust in anything and everyone, I think, if you do that. So stay true to your values and don't change things just to appeal to new audiences. So,
we're talking to you, Tractor Supply.
Exactly. That you need to have in place. And everything else should flow from that. But I think there's a lot here, Shell, that to think about: the transparency, the authenticity, the genuineness of people engaging with other people in a way that you believe them. There's a lot to go wrong. Much of it self-inflicted by organizations, not because they're stupid, but they just make mistakes. This is people we're talking about. So the role of the communicator in this context then is to guide the organization, surely, although you can't dump the whole responsibility on the communicators. It's got to start with the leadership of the organization, and that's where everything stems from, it seems to me.
But for the communicators, I think we need to consider counseling the leaders on that.
Right. Didn't I say that? I did say something else. Did I not? Did I say counseling? Okay. So it is precisely that, guiding them to help them lead. But what more can I say? Nothing really, because these tips, these how-tos, these suggestions are great pointers for everyone to listen to, it seems to me.
So that'll bring a end to this episode of For Immediate Release, episode number 430 for September. Our next long-form monthly episode will drop on Monday, October 27th. So we're recording that on Saturday, October 25th. In the meantime, I hope to be able to read or play more comments than we had this time around. And there are all kinds of ways that you can comment. You can send an email to fircomments@gmail.com. Attach an audio file to that. It's been a long time since we've had an audio comment. Somebody send us an audio comment. I don't care what it is. We'll play it. You can use the record voicemail tab on the right-hand side of the FIR website, firpodcastnetwork.com. Just click that and record. It'll record up to 90 seconds. Record as many of them as you want. I can edit them together. I have Adobe Audition. I know how to do that. You can leave comments on the show notes. You can leave comments on the posts that we create to promote the show on LinkedIn, Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, you name it. Not X. We're not on X anymore. And I do hope that you will leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way for people to discover FIR. And until our next short midweek episode, that will be a 30 for this episode of For Immediate Release.